Holy shit! Oh my god! Okay. Wayward Pines is now one of the best shows on TV by far. After that, definitely. By far. Guys, this is one of the most shocking episodes of TV I think I've ever seen in my life, honestly. I have been trying to process this all day long. I tried to review it yesterday, I couldn't. It's been on my mind all day, and finally I will review it to you. I'm sorry that it took me so long to review it. I mean, it's one of those things where it's just so mind-blowing. I didn't even think of this possibility. Guys, this show, oh my god. Wayward Pines has just proven itself to be one of the greatest TV shows of the year by far. Not only that, but probably the most shocking show I've seen all year. I never even thought of this possibility, and I love that. Everything about this episode is as shocking as you believe it would be, and I was worried that they would ruin the show with this episode. Because when you have an episode called The Truth, and it's episode 5, it's like, what's the point in watching? Why are we continuing the show in the next 5 episodes? Well, that's why. Because it completely changed the show. And it completely changed, like, the main characters and things like that. And I absolutely love that. I love what this episode did. Everything's different now. Now we know the truth. Now we know what's going on. Everything's so different. And everything we thought of has just all been fake. And I absolutely love that about this episode. It changed pretty much everything. And we just have to get into it because it's huge. So, we start right away with Ethan going over the wall because he's tired of not knowing what's behind the wall. He doesn't care what's behind it. He's going over it. And he hears growling and he's into the woods. He hears a rustling sound and fires into the trees. He's cut by something that speeds up by, and he fires again and seems to be hit as there's a cry. So right away, that perfectly puts you into the episode because this is going to tell you, okay, you're finally going to get those answers that you want. So, Amy invites Ben to walk to school with her, Sam and Katie, and he says sure. She says she'll see him at 7, tells him where to meet them. He says tonight was cool, and then she gives him a little kiss. He goes inside and finds Theresa at the sink in a daze, and she's, like, completely out of it. I don't know why, but she's, like, so out of it in this scene. He asks if she's okay, and she says she's fine. She says Ethan's working late, and she says he's trying to finish up a case, and says they're gonna get out of there soon, and go back to Seattle. And Ethan rinses the wound on his arm in a creek, and he finds, and Ben says that sounds great. Theresa goes back to starting out the window, but she's staring at the window, but then falls into bed later, and I think she's just trying to get answers. She's sick of not getting answers, and I think she just really wants answers. That's really what I think is going on there. So, Ethan tries to get some rest, but wildlife noise are keeping him awake, and Theresa wakes the next morning, startled, and looks around. Ethan wakes in the woods. Hang on 1 second, guys. See, that's how mind-blowing this is. I had to leave the room. Seriously. So basically, she finds Ben eating breakfast, and he said, and I loved this scene. Oh my god, the kid that plays Ben. Something I love about Ben's character is that on any other TV show, this kid would be the most annoying teenager ever. He'd be rude to his mom. Everyone would hate him. That's his character, because that's what we think of when we think of teenagers. Not that teenagers aren't like that, and they're very moody, but that's just not a very compelling character on TV. Someone like Ben, this is the kind of teenager character we need to see, because he talks to Theresa, and I really love what he says to her. He says he's got friends, but Theresa says they don't know what this town is about. They need to be careful because they don't know who their real friends are. I understand her point, but he asks who would want to be friends with a loser like him, and he says they told him to fit in, so he is. He definitely feels very strange, and he says she's just sitting around the house hoping things get better, but they never do. And that's the one thing. He's fitting in, but she's not. He is accepting things the way they are. He's, acclimating to this new life, and she's not. And I loved seeing that about this episode. I thought that was an amazing scene. I absolutely love what they did there. So this really gets Theresa thinking about that job, and she's sighing. She knows she has to take it now. After what happened, she just has to. So Ethan checks his map and compass. He's looking for the route to Boys. He packs his gear and heads out. Ben shows up to school, and it looks like cameras are monitoring all the kids, and all the kids say hi to Ben. He asks Amy why these kids are all being nice to him and asks if they were told to be his friend, because at his old school, he was treated differently. He was weird, and he was invisible, and here everyone loves him, so he doesn't really know what's going on. So Amy asks if it isn't a good thing, but he says he just doesn't get it. Amy says the school is like no other school and says they're all in this together. He asks him what, then he's called to a room for orientation, which is where the majority of the episode takes place and where the revelations come out, and I love the orientation scenes, I have to say. He asks what that is, but Amy says is good luck. All Amy says is good luck. So he heads off, and Theresa goes to the reality office, knocks, and goes inside. Bill says she must be his new number 2, and then whistles at her. And he says everyone calls him Big Bill and says she's easier on the eyes than Petey. Of course, Petey was the guy that Ethan had to kill in the last episode. So he says, with that graffiti on Main Street, you just never know. He says just the two of them now. He says Henrietta files and she wanted Petey's job himself. Of course, Petey didn't actually, Ethan didn't kill him. Petey killed himself, if you remember, it was more of a mercy killing. So Theresa says Henrietta was likely more experienced, but he says they said she was perfect. He hands her a file and says that's her first client. He says Wayne lost his phone in the accident, so she can't call him. He tells her that he was hit by a police car and then head first into concrete. He said Nurse Pam fixed him up good. And he says Wayne lost everything in the accident, doesn't even have a place to stay. She asks if he wants her to sell Wayne a house, but he says to give him a house and says it's a welcome gift. And he then tells her thank Ethan for killing Petey. Now this Ben guy is very interesting to me, especially when we find out what's actually going on. I'm definitely interested in seeing if he might know what's actually going on here. So we get to this totally white sparse room. Carrie and Reed are already there seated. They're new too. He sits beside them and they hear the squeaking sound. And the majority of this episode is Megan talking to them. Whoever plays Megan, oh my god, where the hell have you been? You are such an amazing actress. Seriously, I could just listen to her talk and it'd be amazing. A lot of the episodes are just her talking to them, and I loved it. She's revealing all these things that we want to know. And she wheels in a cart, then turns off the lights. She wheels to a cart, then spots them behind them, then turns on the projector. A screen lowers from the wall in front of them. She goes to stand beside it. Megan says, welcome to orientation. Ethan's in the woods, still and creeping along. He comes upon some ruins of what looks like a chapel, and he stops to consult a map and finds it on the map with the indication it was still an active church. So she shows them students 1 through 3 and says they were the first to go through orientation and were like them and had only just arrived. She says they show great aptitude during individual sessions like they did too. She says if they make it through, they will be a part of the first generation of Wayward Pines, and she says it's a great honor and privilege. She says they only allow those that are truly exceptional join the first generation, and Ben asks what she means by truly ready, and she says for the truth, and I'm like, what the hell is she talking about? Like, at this point, I had no idea what she was talking about, and they are as lost as I was. I was like, what are you talking about? So Theresa goes to a hospital looking for Wayne Johnson. She goes into his room, and I definitely feel like this guy knows a lot more than he's saying. I definitely feel like he knows what actually is going on here. So she introduces herself. She says she heard he needs some assistance to find a place to live. She says she has a place she thinks he'll love that just came on the market, and he says to just stop. She says she's just there to help, but he says he just wants to be alone, and she offers a call to the nurse, but he says not her. So Theresa asks if he's feeling confused. He can talk to her. He asks if she saw it, and she asks what. He says after the accident, he saw something. He says it was awful. He says they did something to him, and all of them. He says that nurse was there, and Theresa sees the call lights on and thinks Pam might be listening, which obviously is not good. So she sits down, whispers, and the scene's all very creepy. I love it, though. He says no one, and she says this place is not safe. And she asks him to quickly tell her what he saw. But then Nurse Pam comes in and asks if he knows Mr. Johnson. And she says she was just showing him some properties. And Pam says she knew Petey would never make it. Says he was far too much of a free thinker than give a knowing look to Wayne. So Theresa tells him to come look at the house with her and says it's very private. So then Megan shows him a photo and asks what it is. It's a photo of the town from 14 years ago. And I'm like, why should we care about this? She shows him another and asks what's off about it. And Ben spots something in the outer left corner. Megan says it was their first evidence of their existence. I'm like, what? Now, Reed thinks it's Bigfoot, but she says Bigfoot is alone. And she shows him a blurry photo of a pale creature. And says it cost them 2 lives to get. She says they call them Abbeys and said it's short for a genetic aberration. She says they are efficient carnivores, the worst on the planet, and Ethan's out among them and hears a growling. So, and I love the way they did this. They keep having Megan talk, and then Ethan would experience. I thought that was really cool the way they handled it. So Megan says, "An Abby can kill and devour an armed soldier in minutes." She says they travel in herds, and survival is not possible if you encounter one. She shows them bird-like talons that can kill prey in a singular stroke. She says their oversized ears can hear anything, and that their sense of smell is far superior to their own. She says they become this, and says their DNA is very close to other creatures. And Ethan watches them feed on a buck, and Ben says it looks like us, and she says it once was. So, you know there's more going on here. So basically, they take a little break, they go to lunch, and Ben sits picking at his food. And Amy says she didn't eat for 2 days after orientation. She asks if things are making more sense now, and he says no. Amy says it takes some time to take it all in. Ben says it's just the basic logic or illogic. He says if what Megan is saying is true, how has he never heard of them before? Because clearly they're out there, and he's never heard of them. And he says they're running around in broad daylight in Idaho, and then asks if that's what they are. And she says if it's true, and they are in Idaho. And Amy tells Ben it's just lunch and says it will make sense soon. Ethan's making his way through the woods. So we go, and then they go back to orientation. Now this is where things get amazing. This scene goes on for like 20-something minutes. Now, it does cut to commercial like 3 times. But it goes on, I'd say, for a good 20 minutes. And it's awesome the way they handled it. So, Megan says that she knows they're confused, but it should clear things up. She hands them each a coin, says they don't hold value anymore, but hold answers. And Theresa takes Wayne to the house to look around, and she says there's a lot of land space, was built about 12 years ago and is, like, new. She looks at the cameras in the kitchen, and Theresa said they can start in the back and work their way through. And Ethan takes a break to get his bearings and spots something up ahead. He sees a sign, and Ben asks if the coin's from Roman times, and asks if he can scrape the coin off. And Ethan has found an old freeway sign from Boys. Ben scrapes and says it's a quarter and then asks how old it is. She says to tell him he reads the year as 2095. What? And he says it's not possible. Megan says to think about facts and possibility. And this is where we find out what's actually going on here. Because Megan asked Ben what the last thing he remembers was, and he says the accident. And then Carrie says a hit and run, and Reed says it was a car crash. So clearly they were all in these accidents, and Ethan walks his way through the woods. Megan asks what's next in their memory. Ben says he woke up in the Wayward Pines Hospital, and she asks how long they were unconscious. Says they probably thought it was a day or so, and she says their accidents were not accidents at all. They were chosen to be there. So every single one of these accidents that have happened, they were all selected, and that is genius. I never thought of that. I never thought that they selected them. That right there is awesome, but that's not all that's going on. I love that. So she says it's a special community, not part of the world they once knew, but a very different world. She says Abby's thrive and rule, and she says it took a long time. Ethan works his way through some strange-looking sights. He says she says that these coins are the last known relics of human civilization that died out almost 2,000 years ago. And we find out here that this is not 2014. It's 4028. So, what we just found out is that we're in 4028, civilization's dead, and these kids have been selected. Why? Well, we find out more later, but that right there, oh my god, that has to be one of the most genius things ever, honestly. All this time, I thought these town, they were, like, killers, maybe they were cannibals, maybe they were, just this weird town. I never thought they were doing good things. I never thought that. So that is awesome. I love that. So Ethan makes it out of the world, and now that we know that civilization's dead, we now see him look at Boys in the distance, and it's a relic that's obviously been long decimated. He's shocked at it, and really what Ethan's supposed to represent is the shock that we have right now, and I love that they did that in this episode. So Theresa turns on the wash, and then whispers to Wayne that there are cameras and microphones as he has to keep his voice down. She asks what he saw, and Wayne says he woke up after the accident and doesn't remember much. So Megan asks the kids, how can it be 4028? She shows them a lab mouse, because obviously, they definitely are still confused. They definitely need more clarification of what's going on here. So, this I love. She shows them this lab mouse. Says this mouse can hibernate all winter long without eating or drinking, and it lives longer as a result. And Wayne says he remembers looking out of glass like a window. And Theresa asks if it was a car, and he says he was standing and the window was small like the washer's glass. And Megan says they were all placed in a hibernation chambers after their accidents. And Wayne says people were looking in at him like the nurse said he passed out. So I definitely feel like Wayne knows what's going on here. He just doesn't want to say anything. So Megan says, when you awoke, you became part of the first generation. And Ben's definitely catching on to this. So Wayne says they were more of these chambers and they were all filled with people. And Theresa's stunned. And Ben asks why they were chosen, which is a good question. I mean, why were they chosen? Now, Megan says that's the most important question. She says they were chosen to ensure the survival of humanity. These kids were chosen to do this. And Wayne asks Theresa if she believes him, and she says she does. She says she's gonna figure this out, but he says he needs to take this house and do it with a smile on his face. She hands over the keys and said the place is his and he can move in and start living his life. She offers him the keys. He thanks her with a smile and she leaves. Ethan sees a helicopter, waves, it lands in front of him, and Megan says over 2,000 years ago a scientist saw the Abbeys coming and knew Mother Nature would change them. Now, the scientist's name was David Pilcher, and he wanted to save a select samples of humans to preserve their kind and create an ark, Wayward Pines. So essentially, the adults are completely in the dark about this. That's why Wayward Pines exists, to represent what humanity once was, and that, again, is genius. So Ethan stares at the chopper and holds his gun firm. Ben asks what scientist, and she says David Pilcher. She says he's always watching over them. He's the guy on the other line that they have been talking to this whole time. It's always been David Pilcher. And, he'll never allow anything to happen to them because they are the future. So they'll never die. All these people that are dying, they're not going to die. Now, why do I think they are doing this now? Why do I think they're killing these people? Because they don't want the adults to know what's going on here. They don't want them to ask questions. They don't want them to talk about the past because it could create, because they're trying to fix things, because that's not how life is right now. And now it makes perfect sense why they can't talk about the past. Life is too bad right now. And they haven't been brainwashed. They've just been kept in the dark about a tons of stuff. That's why they think it's the year 2000, because it represents what humanity once was. I mean, obviously they'd have questions. So I think they just said this to them to keep them sane. That's why they said this to them. So I definitely feel like Arnold Pope was definitely a person that knew what was going on. That's why they had to kill him. Definitely feel like that's what was going on there. And I think maybe, what was her name? You know, the other girl that died. I can't remember her name. I think her name was like Adriana or something. I think she knew as well, so that's why she had to die. Sorry, she was like in the second episode, so I can't remember her. So basically, he tells Ethan to, so basically, then we see the most shocking part of the episode. I absolutely loved this part of the episode. And basically, she says Pilcher's their protector, and a man gets out of the helicopter, and it's Jenkins. And he tells Ethan he never ceases to amaze him, and says no one's ever gone this far, and he is David Pilcher. Now, I will admit, I did kind of see this coming. Only after Megan revealed it, I saw it coming, because I'm like, okay, Jenkins is a doctor. How is he could possibly be David Pilcher? And this makes perfect sense why Jenkins isn't doing what he's doing. And that, I thought, was genius. And Ethan thinks back to just before his accident, talking about Pilcher. And he says they need to go back to Wayward Pines. And Ethan holds his gun out and says that's not boys. And asks if this is some sort of experiment. Because, of course, he doesn't know what's going on. David says to trust his own eyes. He says there's nothing from out there. He says that's all left of their civilization is Wayward Pines. He tells Ethan to come with him and how they can change things for the better. They hear the cries of the Abbeys, and basically the Abbeys are what humans are now. There's no humanity, that humans are so violent, and that's really what we're hearing. So that is very disturbing, but it's awesome as well. So David asks if he wants to stay and discover for himself what's out there, and Megan tells the kids not to tell anyone else, not even their parents, what they learned. She says that don't tell any adults because the future of this town lies not with the adults, but with them. The adults are too, mature to fix this. The adults are too kept in the dark that they'd freak out. The kids know what's going on. That's what I love about this. She says you may think your parents deserve to know, but she says so did Chris. And this guy, Chris, was like them. He says he saw what they saw and then went home and told his parents. She says they decided to go on a trip and says the mom put the garden hose in their exhaust pipe, they cranked their car, and they killed them all. So, Megan says adults can't handle the truth. Obviously, they're going to end up killing themselves, because basically that's what they did. So, she says if adults find out, it's going to put all of Wayward Pines at risk, and I really feel like that's why these people die, because they don't want them to know the truth. They want them to be kept in the dark because of what happened to Chris, and it honestly all makes sense now. It's honestly very understandable. Theresa heads back to the office, looks through the client files, she flips to a page on their family, reads about them, and that I thought was really interesting. Now, of course, Theresa knows nothing that's going on. The question is Ben going to tell her? Because how could he not? So, Megan says that David built an ark for the survival of mankind, and Megan says the ark will only survive if they all follow the rules. And she says one crack will let water, let them all drown. She said it's up to them to steer the ark safely ashore. She said it's up to them because they are the first generation. She asked them to repeat it, and they do this time more because she wants to be passionate about this. So she asked them more passionately, and it's a crazy scene. It really is, but I loved it. So Bill comes in and says she deserves a gold star. Then he puts one on her collar. He says he doesn't think he'll do the last star of the week and hands her another file. She asks how often people move there, and he says a couple every month or so, like clockwork. So he says they need someone and they just show up, and that basically is why Ethan's family showed up there, because they needed Ben. That's really what happens. And she says about the accident and says it's strange. Bill says don't think too hard and says he'd hate for something to happen to her pretty face. Now that is really creepy, but obviously he means, okay, don't know the information because we're going to kill you if you know the information. So Megan takes a photo of the three, asks them to follow her. She lines them up in front of a wall, slides back. They walk into a room where a group is assembled, and Megan hands them each a candle. Amy is in that room. She comes up, lights their candles with hers, smiles at Ben, and says, welcome to the first generation. They all wrap their hands on their tables in rhythm. Ben takes it all and seems pleased, and David tells Ethan he knows what he's thinking. He says, you think about the family and friends you won't see again, and the boss you hate. He says, then your mind starts to think about all the lost culture. Now, Ethan, of course, knows what's going on. So clearly, he's been selected as well, even though he's an adult. Now, I don't know why. I think it's just that Ethan's maybe smarter than all of them, because Ethan still has that. Ethan's not kept in the dark yet. So, he has this really is the last of mankind. Do you really have to be there? And he says you then start to realize what you do have. So, Ben walks home from school, looks around. David says you have a family and a future Wayward Pines. This scene was amazingly done. Ethan asks what is Wayward Pines. David says to come with him. He'll show him. The Abbeys cry out. David says they have to go now. Pam is there, helps him in the chopper. David tells the pilot to go as the Abbeys swarm out of the forest, and Ethan's shocked as they fly away, and that's how the episode ends. And now we have to wait 2 weeks. Why do we have to wait 2 weeks? Seriously, this twist is one of the most genius things I've ever heard in my life, honestly. I can't remember the last time I had such a great twist on TV. Honestly, I never thought of this possibility. I never thought that these kids were selected to save humanity, that humanity was dying, that we're actually in the future. I mean, just think about all this. How can I process all this? Seriously, it's crazy. And I have to wait 2 weeks now. I really, no. And I thought this was going to kill the show. No, this made the show 100% better, honestly. Everything about this episode, something I love is that the overlying tension behind this episode, you don't know what's going to happen, and when it happens, Ethan gets to experience it. Now, Ethan knows what's going on, and I'm very worried about Ethan. I feel like Ethan definitely, even though he's not going to be kept in the dark, is he going to die? Are they going to have to kill him? Because obviously they said they can't have any adults know. So Ben obviously is not going to tell Theresa, because obviously he doesn't want his mother to die, so we'll have to see what happens there. Is Theresa going to find out or not? I feel like they're all going to start to find out things, definitely. Wayne, I think, knows the truth. I think definitely Wayne knows, and that's why they're saying that he's going to kill them and things like that. Ben, I feel like, also kind of knows what's going on. I definitely feel like that's happening as well. Now, I do have some questions, though. Why keep the parents in the dark about it? Why would they, why not tell them about it? That's really what I want to know. What's going to happen if you do tell your parents? Because obviously Chris was just an example. That doesn't mean everyone's going to end up like that. That's just an example. So there's no way that everyone's going to end up killing themselves as they find out the truth. There's no way that's going to happen. So I definitely feel like I want to know what's going on there. Why were these kids randomly selected? How did it get this bad? That's what I want to know. How the hell did it get this bad? And of course, there's also the question, how the hell is David Pilcher still alive after 1,000 years? See, what I think is going on is that David Pilcher, I think, maybe could time travel, because since he's such a talented and gifted doctor, I think he's time traveled from the year 2014 to the year 4084. That's really what's going on there. Which, yeah, that's very far away, so I'm very interested to see what's going on with that. Also, the idea that, Sheriff Pope, I think, also knew what was going on. My other question is, what is going to happen now they know what's going on? Is Ben going to tell his parents? I definitely could see that happening. Now he can trust pretty much everyone. Now we know that he can trust Megan. He can trust these kids. They're not evil people. They're just trying to protect humanity. They're keeping people in the dark because they don't want them to know the truth because they're afraid they're going to freak out about it. Because obviously what happened to this kid Chris, his parents freaked out, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to react that way. That's something they need to realize, that not just because one person freaks out doesn't mean everyone's going to. And they seem to think that that is the truth for everyone, but not everyone's going to freak out. It's that simple. Wow, I can't get over this twist. I really can't, guys. It's so mind-blowing. I love what they did with this. I really do. And also, the first generation, how exactly are they going to save humanity? What exactly are they going to do to save humanity? This makes sense why everyone was acting nice to Ben, because everyone in that school is there for the same purpose, to be the first generation, which I think is really interesting, definitely. Ethan and David and Pam, they're obviously going to go find out what's going on here. I feel like one of them's going to die. David obviously is not going to die. He created this world. If he didn't want Ethan to go with him, he would have obviously said it. But just thinking that Jenkins has been David all this time honestly does make a lot of sense. That makes sense why he told him that they need Ethan there. It makes sense why he put him there in the first place. And I knew that he was in the dark. I knew that he knew. I knew that definitely he was keeping secrets. And now we know he knows everything because he created the damn world. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows everything. And I love that we now know exactly what's going on with Jenkins. That's something I've wanted to know since the pilot. And now we finally know that he's actually David Pilcher. And I think that's awesome. How is Ben going to process all this? I mean, if I really was in this situation, I would not be able to stomach this. I really wouldn't. I'd be like, I have to tell my parents. I just have to. How can you keep that secret from your parents? That's something that I'm definitely interested in seeing how they're going to experiment with that. Something I think is going to be very interesting to see if he really can keep this from Ethan and Theresa. Obviously, Ethan knows, but Theresa doesn't. So I'm interested in seeing how that's going to be. Theresa's job, I definitely feel like it's not going to involve her. I really do. I feel like they know what's going on, but they're not going to tell her, and it's going to drive her insane. We'll have to see what happens there. That's going to be very interesting as well. Let's talk about Kate. Do you think that Kate knows what's going on? I definitely feel like Kate has an idea. Definitely I think she does. Now, some people think there might be clones. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that there's just a way to time travel out of Wayward Pines. I think it definitely is what's possible. The reason they can't leave Wayward Pines now is because they don't want them to see the outer world. That makes sense why they can't leave Wayward Pines. That makes sense why they always have to answer the phone. That makes sense why if someone talks about the past, they have to kill them. Because that's dead. Civilization's dead. That's not the world anymore. They don't want to reminisce on the memories because they don't have those memories. They're stuck there because it's the only safe place in the world. And that makes perfect sense. It's basically a safe haven for them. And if they get out of there, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen to Ethan? I have no idea what's going to happen to him. I can't wait to see what happens when the show returns. Oh my god, I cannot wait till, like, the end of June. Because now we have to wait 2 weeks for it, and it really sucks because I really want to know what happens. So yeah, there's no Wayward Pines next week, which really sucks. This was the perfect episode to leave it on. We have 5 episodes left, and things are going to get crazy. Think about this, though. Some people said this is basically the anti-Lost, but we have to remember this is a mini-series, not a TV show. This is a mini-series. This is episode 5 of it, and it's official that definitely is a mini-series, and I think now it's just going to get more interesting. If they can keep this quality, this tone, I'm going to fucking love this show. It's going to become one of the best shows on TV. This is by far one of my favorite shows on TV now, by far. Maybe the best show I'm watching on TV, like, this week. Maybe, honestly, for the summer, definitely. I think it's one of my favorites. But that's basically my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought of this twist. How much has it changed the show? What is it going to do to the characters? Is it going to change everything we love about the show? I definitely feel like it will. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. And I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for Hannibal. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.